So first off, I wanted to thank Maxon for having me here for C4D Live. I'm excited to be with you guys here for today. For those that don't know, my name is Jonathan Winbush. I'm a motion graphics artist. I've been working out here on the West Coast since about 2006. I mainly work in television, movies. I've done some stuff in virtual reality. Basically, if it has a screen on it, I'm designing and animating for it. And within the past year, I've actually started up a YouTube channel, just kind of sharing the knowledge that I've acquired over the past decade or so. And most recently, I've been really working with Cinema 4D and Unreal, coming up with a workflow on how to integrate the two together. And so that's what my presentation is going to be on today. But first, let me show you guys my body of work. So I'm going to kick this off with my demo reel. All right, so before we get started, it wouldn't be an official Winbush tutorial without a what up, Winbush here. And today I'm excited to show you guys how I made this. Now, if I bring my desktop up and we scrub through this video here, I'm going to show you guys a couple of things here. So this tutorial is all about how to bring Cinema 4D into Unreal. And so for this first scene here, I have this water sphere going off inside of there. So in particular, I'm going to show you guys how to do this part right here, how to bring X particles into Unreal. And then if I scroll forward, we have this scene here, which is my favorite part of the sequence. It's this neon synthwave city scene. So I'm going to show you guys exactly how I took a kickbash from Pixel Labs, brought that into Cinema 4D, used MoGraph Cloner to build this whole city scene out. And then I brought everything into Unreal. So I'll show you guys how to do that. But first, I'm going to show you guys how to build out this scene right here. This is the easiest one and the most simplest one to kind of show you guys, get your feet wet on how to bring Cinema 4D into Unreal. It's a real simple, neon space tunnel that we fly through until we get to the end. And so I'm going to start off with this scene here. Let's get everything kicked off with Cinema 4D. So I have this opened up. I'm using version R21.2, which is the latest version as of now. So I'm going to start off by opening up that scene there. And what I have right here is I have a kit bash model from a sci-fi kit that I got off of ArtStation. And so just to break it down, it's real simple. I have a centerpiece here. I have two end pieces here. And then I have two light panels here that when we put our materials on here, it's actually going to shine through these holes here. And so the first steps we want to do is I'm going to show you guys how I textured this so that the textures could properly be imported into Unreal Engine. And so down here in the left-hand corner, lower left-hand corner, I'm going to just double click with my mouse, and then I'm going to make this first material. Let's make this one sci-fi blue. So I just named this sci-fi blue. If I double click on it, open it up here, I'm going to first start off by picking my blue color. So I'm going to come over to RGB. I already have my attributes written down that I use, but usually if I'm picking colors, I just come over here to spectrum and I'll start picking them on here. I like using the gradient tool over here to pick my colors. But like I said, I already have my colors already written down. So for my blue, for my red, I'm going to go 0. For my green, I'm going to do 122. And for my blue, I'm going to do 114. There we go. And that's the blue color that I picked. And then I'm going to come down to reflectance. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to click remove. So the default specular, I don't want that. And what I found is whenever I come in, add like a GGC or what is that, GGX, it imports better into Unreal. I found if I use the default specular, it doesn't always give me the desired results in there. And so I usually come in, do GGX, and then for right here where it says layer 1, I'll bring it down to like 1 or 2%. And that usually gives me enough gloss for whenever I bring it into Unreal. It looks pretty decent in there. And that's all I have to do for that one. And so I'm just going to make a duplicate of this material here. So I'm going to hold down left control on my keyboard. I'm on PC, by the way. So hold down left control, then left click and drag over. Let me double click this. So I've just made a copy of my material here. And I'm going to name this one sci-fi white, even though we're just going to pick an off-white color. So since this is a copy, I don't have to do anything to the reflectance channel here. I'm going to come up to color, and I'm actually going to type in my RGB attributes here. So I did kind of like a off-white. I did like 118 all the way down. Here we go. So it's a little bit of an off-white, I guess a grayish color. And so now I'm going to just click and drag these where I want these to be materialized. And there we go. That's my outer shell of my sci-fi panel. So now I'm going to work on my light panels here. So I'm going to just double click, make another material, and I'm going to name this one neon blue. And then I'm actually going to turn off my color and my reflectance channel, and I'm going to turn on my luminance channel. So the one cool thing about the luminance channel is it does get translated into Unreal as an immersive channel, in which I'll show you how to work that out when we get into Unreal. And so we don't want to mess with our brightness inside of Cinema 4D, because Unreal gives us complete control over this functionality, and it turns out looking really cool. And so all I'm going to do here is pick the color that I want. So again, I'm just going to go to RGB, and for my neon blue, for the red, I'm going to go 0. For green, I'm going to do 183. And for blue, I'm going to leave it at 255. Then I'm just going to drag these onto my light panels here, like so. So the next step from here is I want to add a MoGraph cloner to make a clone of this object, and then we'll build our tunnel scene out with another cloner. So we're going to have a cloner within a cloner that kind of build our tunnel out. So I'll show you guys exactly what I mean here. So first, I'm going to come under MoGraph, come under cloner, and then I'm going to drag my panel under here, under my cloner. And you can see now it's making a linear stack here, which we don't want. First, we want to make this into a radial image, and then we'll make our linear stack on our second cloner. So let me show you exactly what I mean. I'm going to click on cloner here, and under object, if I look at mode, right now it's on linear. If I click on radial, it actually radials it out, making to like a circular motion, but I don't want it pointing that way. So I'm going to come under coordinates. Let's make this 190. So now we're getting the starter of our panel here, or of our tunnel here. So I'm going to click back on object. I'm going to leave my count at 5. Let me expand this out a little bit, maybe around there, maybe like 79. And then I want to make these panels a little bit larger. So I'm going to come under transform, and then under my X, Y, and Z, I'm going to just add 0.5 to each one of these. So they're going to end up being a 1.5, something like that. And now the next step is I want to make a clone of this to extend out into our scene. So actually, let me name this one cloner panel 12. So I'm just naming this so I know exactly what this cloner is. And then let me come back under MoGraph, make another cloner, and I'm going to drag this cloner under this one. And again, it made a linear stack of it. And so what I'm going to do is come under objects. I'm going to leave it at linear, but let me come under here where it says Y. I'm going to bring that down to 0. And then under coordinates, there we go. I'm going to make this 90, somewhere around there. Then come back under object. And I believe it's on the Y. Let me see. Yeah, somewhere around there. So I want to extend this out maybe to about there. So you can see that we made a clone of our clone. And if I make this count up to like 16, you can see that it's really going to go across the field here, which I'm not sure what happened to my scene. There you go. So if you ever lose yourself in the viewport, if you click H, that should bring you back into a good position, just if you get lost like that. Cool. So you can see that we have our tunnel built out now. So now I'm going to build like the outside shell, which is pretty much just a tube. So if I click on this, and then I'm going to come down to orientation, make it +Z. So now you can see my tube is facing in the same direction here. So I'm going to go inner radius, just make that 90. So it's not extruding our tunnel here at all, or our panels here at all. And then I'm going to extend the height maybe by like 5,000. Here we go. Somewhere around there. Then I'm going to click on my cloner. And I'm just going to drag this to the beginning of my tube here, like so. Here we go. Somewhere around there is looking pretty good. So if I look down my tunnel, you can see now we have like our sci-fi panels inside of our tunnel here. And if we want to offset this a little bit so it doesn't look just linear going all the way down, if I come under my object tag and no, that's not the right one. There you go. So right here under H, if I move this, you can see it's starting to twist and turn it a little bit just to kind of offset it so it's not so linear going down the tube there. You can see it's not exactly circular. So I'm going to have to add some more segments in here. So I believe it's my height segments. All right, cool. So the next step from here is let's start building out a material for our tunnel. So I made a new material. I'm going to name this one Tunnel Outside. Let me double click on this to bring it up. So for my color, I come under RGB. I'm going to do like a blackish color here. So let's do maybe, I'll click on RGB. Let's do 46, somewhere around there. Then again, I'm going to come to remove. For remove the default specular, come to add a GDC or GDX, sorry. Then come down, make this like 2%. And then on this one, I'm actually going to add a normal channel here to kind of give it some textures in here. Let me click and drag this normal map over here. Click no. Then I'm going to drag this onto my tunnel. And then I'm going to click on my material over here. And you can see where it says projection. I'm actually going to make it cubic. And then for my length, I'm going to do 25 and 25 for the U and the V. Like so. And there's our basic tunnel there. And then one last thing is we need to add some type of end cap here so that we can go into the white light. So I'm going to come back under here, under where my primitives are. Click on disk. Let me drag this out over here. So I have my disk here. And for orientation, I'm going to go +Z to make it upright. I don't really need to add any segments because I'm just going to cap it off here, but I do need to make a material for it. So I'm going to make a copy of my neon blue. Just name this one white and just add neon white. Double click on that. Click on my luminance channel. Then I'm just going to make this one pure white. Click and drag it onto here. And there we go. So now we have that capped off there. And I already have my camera put into my scene here, but basically this is just the default Cinema 4D camera. Nothing fancy going on. I just have a keyframe at the start and the beginning. I mean at the start and the end. So this scene is around 90 frames at 24 FPS. So if I click play, you can see we're going to the end of the tunnel here. And you can see that we're doing a little rotation here as well. So if you look on my rotation keyframe in here, if I scroll through this, you can see I just have it rotating at like 180 degrees there. So if I click back at the beginning and click play, then boom. And so if I want to bring this into Unreal, what I'm going to do is, and let me stop this. So you want to come up to File and then come down to Save your project for Cineware. And so this is something that's new in version R21. If I was using version R20 and I believe 19, it's called Save for Melange, but it has the same principles behind it. So we want to click here where it says Save Project for Cineware. And then I'm going to find my UE4 folder. And so this is, actually, let me go back. So I have my scene here called NAB tunnel _ cinema 4D. And the way that I usually organize my project when I'm going to be working in Unreal is I like to label it at the end on that particular program that I'm using. So I usually build everything out in Cinema. And so that would be _C4D. And then when I'm ready to export it out for Cineware, I would do UE4 for Unreal Engine 4. Like so. And I'll show you exactly why now. So if I click on save, I'm going to let this save out here. So let me find where I saved that out at. Right there. So you see NAB tunnel _UE4. But if you look at the type, it's a C4D file. And so next I'm going to open up my Epic launcher. So we have two ways to actually get into Unreal. If you made a shortcut for Unreal Engine, you could just click on so. But I want to show you guys the Epic launcher because this is what you'll first see whenever you get into Unreal. And in the upper right hand corner, you'll see Launch Unreal Engine. Let me click on this. And now it's going to start up Unreal Engine. And the first thing you're going to see is going to pop up with some templates here. And then I'll kind of walk through these templates for you guys just so you kind of see what's going on. Okay, so this is what pops up whenever you launch Unreal. And down here, this is something that's actually new in version 4.24. They have these new project categories. Before, when you open up Unreal, like it's basically a game engine. So this was the only category that they had previously. So if you click on next, you can see that we have a whole bunch of different templates to get you started off. Like if you wanted to make like a first person shooter, or if you wanted to make like some type of driving game, like these are the templates that you would use to get you started off. They even have one for VR, or usually for like motion graphics artists like myself, we would just usually start off with a blank slate, but it still gave us like a bunch of stuff that we didn't really need. Like if I click next, it gives us a whole bunch of different project settings. Like if you wanted to use Blueprint, or if you actually wanted to code by hand, we have a ray tracing option here. I want to go back and show you guys that they actually added this category in here too. And this is for artists like us. So it's called Film, Television, and Live Events. So if I click on this, you can see that they really simplified it. We're just going to start off with a blank slate. So let me click next. And then same thing here. It's simplified it down to just two options here. So do you want starter content, or don't you want starter content? Or if you have a video card or a graphics card, excuse me, that could use ray tracing, you can actually enable it straight from the start, so you don't have to mess around with any menus like you've had in the past. And then down here, all you have to do is select where you want to save it at. And so I already have a folder here called UE4. Double click on that, select folder. And then for project name, I'm going to just do NAB _tunnel. And you don't, you always have to have something in there. Like I usually use underscore. Like if you try to hit space bar, you can see it says projects names may not contain any space. And so I usually just get away with doing an underscore like so. And then we're good to go. So we're just going to click on create project, and we're going to get started up in the Unreal Engine. Okay, so now we have Unreal Engine open. You can see over here, we have some things to get us started off. We have a floor. We have player start, which is actually, if we click play here, this is where we're going to start at in the scene. So if you're doing like an interactive experience, it works just like if you're playing a video game with your keyboard and mouse. So WASD, you move around like that. But we don't need that because we're making a cinematic experience. So I could delete my player start, and then I'm going to actually delete my floor as well. And then over here, let's see, down here in the lower right hand corner, this is usually something that pops up here. Like it says project file is out of date. We recommend that you update it. Just click update. And then over here where it says new plugins are available, that's because I have some third-party plugins in here. And so I have like the Aja Media Player, Blackmagic Player, and then Megascans, which if you have an Epic account, you get the Megascans library completely free. Let me show you guys how you would import stuff. So you want to click on built-in. Like I already have it permanently installed right here, but it's called the Datasmith plugin. And this is what you're going to need to bring your stuff from Cinema 4D into Unreal. But if you don't see this here, like usually when you first start off, you're not going to have this here. All you have to do is go to built-in, come over to search and type in C4D. And then you'll see Datasmith C4D importer. And all you have to do is enable it. And once you hit enable, a little box down here will say that you have to restart your scene. And so every time you do that, all you do is hit restart. It's pretty fast. It's going to enable it. And it's going to open it up to our default setting like so. So to kick this off, let me get you started by clicking Datasmith. And then I just have to find that Cineware file that I saved out before. So I'm going to go into my project files, UE4. There we go. Click open. And then this is going to ask us what folder we want to save it in. I usually just save it in the content folder. And if you come down here in the lower right hand corner where it says content browser, this is where everything's going to show up at. You can see that we have the content folder right here. So I'm going to click OK. And then depending on how big your file size is, sometimes this is going to take a little bit to process everything. But this usually is the next menu that pops up. It's the Datasmith import options. And so I'm going to bring everything in, my geometry, my materials, my lights, my camera, and my animation. And then if I click on this down button, we have some static mesh options, but I never mess around with these at all. I just leave these at default. So let me click import. And now it's going to start importing our files. And like I said before, depending on your file size, sometimes this could take a few minutes. And so you definitely want to try to keep your file sizes small. And so what I like to do is like with the city scene that I'll show you here in a minute. So like I built out my scene and then I added some pieces in later just so I didn't have like a completely huge file whenever I'm importing. Okay, so now we have the tunnel scene opened up here in Unreal Engine. Let me click down here where it says content. And so you see it made a folder here and it's just named what we named our Cineware file. So NAB_tunnel_UE4. So if I double click on this, you can kind of see everything is separated into these different folders. So we have our texture file, which is just the normal file for our tunnel. And then if I click, usually nothing comes under temp, at least not that I've seen. And then materials. This is our materials that we had from Cinema 4D. And I can actually do this. Now, if I double click on this neon blue, you can see that if I scroll this out so you guys can see a little bit better, right under here, it says emissive glow strength. So let me pull this over here so you guys can see what's going to happen. So if I start pulling it over to the right, you can see in our tunnel, you can see that it's starting to get brighter in here. And it's all happening in real time. Let me click save here. Cool. And then you'll notice too, whenever you import a scene, it says that lighting needs to be rebuilt. I'm going to show you guys how to do that here in a second, but let me go through the content folder. And so down here, we have our geometry as well. And so you notice that each piece of our kit bash model here is all brought in separately. So let me pull this down so you guys could kind of see side by side with Cinema 4D. So if I pull this over and look in our world outliner, and you pull this up, you can see that whenever we take stuff from Cinema 4D, especially if we're using the MoGraph cloner, there's no MoGraph module inside of Unreal Engine. And so what it does is basically everything that was in the MoGraph cloner, like we only have one object here and it's being cloned several times inside of Cinema 4D. But inside of Unreal, it's actually, whenever it's translating, it has to take each one of those clones and makes it its own geometry. So you have to be careful about that as well whenever you're using the MoGraph cloner, because as you can see over here in the world outliner, it's actually bringing everything in as its own individual piece. So say like you had 1,000 objects in here that you use inside your cloner, it's actually going to make 1,000 individual pieces here in a world outliner, if that makes sense. So you're seeing it get pretty crazy pretty quickly if you're not careful with that ahead of time. So if I scroll these all down like so, you can see that these are all from that original cloner there. So if we count these out, there's actually 16 of them. And remember in our cloner here, we had 16. And so just showing you guys that. And then what else do we got here? let me show you the sequencer. So if I come over to my animation tab, this right here that has the clipboard, this is called the sequencer. So if I double click on this, it brings me over to my sequencer window, which is pretty much like a NLE built inside of Unreal Engine. So if I come over to perspective, let's do a cinematic viewport and then come down to my camera. So we're looking through the eyes of our camera. If I start scrolling, this is our animation that we had from in Cinema 4D. So once you do a cinematic viewport, it'll actually bring up your timeline animation cues down here. So you have the play button and it's starting to play through. Like so. And that's basically how easy and fast it is to bring your stuff from Cinema 4D into Unreal. And so the one thing that you notice that it's not really bright in here. So I just added a couple of point lights in here like so. So we brought in a point light like this. And actually let me get off my camera here so I don't mess that up. So I'm just going to start moving our lights in here like that. Then let me go back to my camera. There you go. And then if I hold down, let me actually click out of here again. So if I hold down the Alt key and left click, it would actually make a duplicate. So I just kept duplicating these lights like so. And if you look at my raw outliner, you can see that it's duplicating the light there. See, now I have a third light. And I just kept doing that all the way through. And I'm not going to go through the render process on this scene. I kind of just wanted to use this scene as just a disclaimer to kind of show you guys how easy it is to bring your files in. But I'm going to get into the real fun stuff in the next scene, which is the city scene. So I'm going to show you how to bring in the atmospheric fog, how to bring up the cool shadows, the cool lighting and all that stuff, and how to render everything out. So let me get this scene set up here. I'm going to close this scene out here. We'll get everything started. Okay, so I have a blank slate again here at Cinema 4D. Let me actually go over and show you my original kit bastion that I bought from Pixel Labs. And so I have these 6 buildings that I kind of took from the Pixel Labs City kit, the kit bash kit that they have on their site. And I just went in and I made my own materials for them. And so if I pull up my material window here, you can see the materials are real simple, kind of like how I did with the tunnel. So this material is just kind of like a dark purple. I just have a reflectance of 1% in there. And then I have like a medium gray, no reflectance at all, just a straight up gray material. And then I have a light gray in there, which I'm using for some of the accents parts. So I'm using like the dark gray and the light gray just for the piping and some of the antennas in there and stuff like that. I'm going real simple, no real textures at all. And then I have these neon lights in here. Pretty similar how I built the other scenes out. And so I have neon blue, neon orange, and neon purple. And if I scroll through my buildings here, you can see that I pretty much just replaced all the windows and the glass and everything with these neon lights, even the billboards on here, because I really wanted to try to give it like this synthwave, nighttime, cyberpunkish type feel to it. And so I wanted to have like the actual windows illuminate our scene because I think it looks really cool when it's reflecting like off this reflectance material here. Even though it's only at 1%, we still get that little bit of rustic detail in there, which I think turned out pretty cool. And so let me show you really quick how you can build out a city scene within a matter of minutes. And so I'm going to come over to MoGraph Cloner. And I think my first 3 buildings here. Yeah, so these 3 are my tall buildings. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and actually double click to turn these off because I'm going to start off with these little buildings here and then build my way out. And so I'm going to take these 3 buildings here, bring them into my cloner. If I look at my cloner, you can see the buildings are all stacked on top of each other. So if I come under my objects tag on my Y-axis, I'm going to zero this out. And then I'm going to start moving this in a negative direction on my axis. On my X, let's try like X negative 20,000. Yeah, so that's giving us a pretty decent distance in here. And then under count, I can actually make this 30. So now we have 30 buildings going way off into the horizon there. And if I want to like kind of scoot these buildings together a little bit so they're not so far apart, if I come down under a mount, I could just drag this over to the left, start squeezing my buildings in here a little bit. And as you can see, the pattern of the buildings are pretty linear. And so I have this building, that building, the short one, and then the pattern just repeats. So if I come under clones and click on random, I could kind of randomize these out. And under seed here, let's say if I click like 1, just pick a random number, it will kind of randomize them. So if I click like 25, you can see that the buildings are just randomizing in there. And the more buildings that I have in there, the more, I guess, detail you can have in there. But I only built out these 3 short ones, but just depends on the level of detail that you want in there. And so you can see I have all these buildings going off into the horizon there. And I'm going to add like a back layer to here. So another building row. So if I hold down the control key, make a duplicate of this cloner, just drag this out like so. And then all I have to do is come down to my seed, pick another random number. And now we have buildings behind those buildings. And I can actually, let's say we reduce the count of this one and then just drag it out. So it's not exactly the same. And so we're just kind of offsetting them there a little bit, just to kind of give it the illusion of a little bit of randomness in there. And then if I want now, so that we don't really, so we don't see any like blank spaces over here, I'm going to make another duplicate of this one and just delete out these buildings. And then this is where I'm going to add my tall buildings. So actually let me zero out my coordinate on this cloner. So it's in the exact 0 here. Then I'm going to drag these 3 buildings into this cloner. And as you can see, it's already cloning these tall buildings out. So this is just quick and dirty, just kind of building out our city block here. And I can actually duplicate that again. There we go. And then let's say maybe for clone on this one, let's make it like 18. And then seed it at like 400. So you guys can kind of see the pattern that I'm doing here. And so whenever we're really close to the ground, you can't really tell that they're really replicated, especially for how fast we're going through our scene there. And then once you start adding stuff in there, like the street lights and the glow and the rain and all that different stuff, and especially with motion blur, it really looks like you're just going down a city block and you can't really tell the repeated pattern. And so this is pretty much just for background noise there. Our main focus in our sequence was actually the road and the ship that we're following behind. And so let me build out my other side here. So I'm gonna grab these 2 rows here, hold down Control, duplicate, just drag these over here to my right. There you go. So just wide enough that we can have our street there in the middle. I can actually change these seeds out as well, so it's not exactly the same. Now I can actually take one of my tall buildings, take another duplicate there. So you guys can kind of see what I'm going for. Stuff like that. And so we have like a good blocked out city block in here. And then if you want to start adding like hero buildings and stuff like that, like stuff that you really want to focus on, say if I take my cloner, let's say this building 7 here, I'm gonna hold down Control, just make a copy of it and drag it out here. And let's say this is the building that we kind of want to fly into. So I'll just take this building, bring it down here. So I have it at the end of my scene there. We want to make it a little bit more prominent. So I'm gonna come to my coordinates and let's do our X, Y, and Z scale of 2. So now we have the big building in the middle there. And we don't want to have blank spaces here. So just for example's sake, let's make it a duplicate of this, but I'm actually not going to duplicate this building per se. I'm actually going to make a clone of it. So if I come over here and click on instance, while I still have this selected, it's going to make a clone of it. So if you look here, it's just like what's inside of our cloner. So where it says instance mode, you can actually do like a multi-instance or a render instance. But remember that Unreal Engine only recognizes the instance mode here. it doesn't recognize these other two. So if you do these other two, it's not going to be able to translate that. So make sure you just have it on instance. And I drag this over. And if I want to, I can actually rotate this maybe like 90 degrees, make it look like it's a little bit different. Let's change the scaling on it a little bit. So 2.3 instead, not too much larger. Something like that. Then I can actually just hold down Control, make a copy of this one, put this on this side as well. So you can kind of see that we're starting to build out our hero buildings that we're going to be flying into. And you just start adding little attention to details like that in there. And then, yeah, so that's basically a breakdown of how fast you could build out the city scene. And of course, this will all translate into Unreal, but I just wanted to show you how you could quickly block out your city scene and then just start adding your fine details in from here. And so let me actually close this one out because I'm going to show you my actual final project and exactly how I had that all broken down. So I'm going to close this project out. I don't need to save it. Cool. So I'm going to go back over here, click open project, and let me see, it was city scene there. All right, cool. So this is actually my final project. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick run through of what this looks like. And then I'm going to show you how to export this scene and bring it into Unreal to finally render it out in real time. So if I play through this scene here, you see it's going a little bit slow, probably because of the stream. Let me see if I could just scrub through this. So if I scrub through, you can see I have the city here that's built with the kit bash, like I was saying. So that's just the MoGraph cloner that's over here. I have a couple of lamps in the scene as well. I have a couple of wires that are dangling, which is just the Topo wire by Merkle. And so I use that in here as well. And then you can see it's just a real simple setup. I have two cubes just on each side of the city. And then I have those connected with Topo wire. And that translated pretty well into Unreal, which I was surprised about. I didn't have to do any baking out or anything. And yeah, I have these neon railings and nothing too crazy going on. It's a pretty simple scene here. And so to build out my city, bring it over to Unreal, same thing as before, save project for Anywhere, come over to project files. Actually, there we go, city scene, UE4. And I'm going to do underscore UE4 and click on save. And this is going to take a few moments to save out. This is actually a larger file than what the other one is, but this shouldn't take too long. I think this one equaled out to be about like 3 gigs when it comes down to it. Okay, so our scene is saved out. And so now let me go over and open up Unreal. Okay, same thing as before. Going to go under File, Television, Live Events, click Next, do a blank. Then I'm going to save my project under UE4. I'm just going to name this one NAB City _ live, since we're going live now. Then click Save Create Project. All right, same process as before. Click Update. I'm going to dismiss my plugins. I already have my Datasmith in here. I'm going to delete the floor plan. I'm going to delete the player start. Click on Datasmith. Then I'm going to bring in my Cinema 4D project. There you go, city scene, click open. Gonna do default content browser window right there under that folder. Open this up and then this should pop up asking me what I want to import, which I'm going to be importing everything. So Datasmith import options, let's click import here. So everything is importing right now. It's going to take a few moments here, but once we get started, I think you guys are going to really be amazed to see how fast I'm working in real time, and everything is going to be what the final sequence looks like. So whatever we're seeing on the screen, that's exactly what our final render is going to end up looking like. Okay, so now we have our scene all here in Unreal Engine. Over here on the right hand side, this should look familiar with you, along with everything that's here in the content browser. So I'm going to get started by deleting this reflection capture. I'm actually going to use a rectangular one here later on. And then for my light source, I like to zero it out. So I'm going to hit 0, tab 0, tab 0. And I have my light source here in direct center. And then I'm going to make this almost like a nighttime scene. And I kind of wanted to have these buildings here on the left cascade shadows over on my right. And so I have some attributes that I already have written down that I used for my scene. So it's like negative, let me see, I think it was 112.5, like so. So now you see that we have some shadows casting on these buildings. And it's like my camera right now is moving kind of slow. So if I wanted to speed this up, all I had to do is come up to camera speed and actually just zoom this all the way up to the right. And now I can move a lot faster around my scene here. And what's cool is if I hold down the right bumper on my mouse, or not bumper, my right, whatever you call this thing, the right clicker on my mouse, and I use the first person shooter controls, WASD, I can move around as if I'm moving around inside a video game. And so I'm not using the scroll wheel or anything at all. I'm just holding down the W right now to move forward, and it's going super fast and super smooth. Then A to move to the left and D to move to the right. So I thought that's pretty cool as well. And then if I wanted to pan around, just hold in the middle mouse button like so. And everything is really reactive and really fast. Cool. So enough playing around. I'm going to come down. Let's start off with our materials. So I'm going to come down to my neon material, neon blue, just like before. Crank up the emission on here. Click save. And once I add some fog and everything into here, you'll start to really see these emissions pop. So every time you make a change to your material, just make sure you click on save up here. And I believe that's everything in there. So now you can really see the neon lights and everything in our city start to glow. And then I'm going to come up here to my screen percentage. I'm going to work at 200. And that just kind of helps with the flickering a little bit. And so let me come over and let's change our sky. So I'm going to click on sky sphere. And over here in the lower right hand corner, I'm going to do these override settings. And so for my zenith, your zenith is exact north. So if I click on this, actually let me look up north. So if I pan my camera up north, I'm going to make this like a purplish color. So the whole theme was like a synthwave type theme. Horizon, same thing. Make this purple. And as you can see, the color is not changing. And that's because I forgot to change this right here where it says colors determined by sun position. We don't want the sun position to determine what we're doing here. We want to use something more abstract. So I'm going to click this off. And now you can see that it changed our environment to what we have down here under our override settings. So for my clouds, I'm going to make them a little bit darker also. Maybe like a darker blue, somewhere around there. And then overall color, let's see what it looks like if I bring it down. Yeah, maybe around there, somewhere around there. Click OK. Cool. And then see if we have anything else in here we want to mess around with. I think everything's cool for that. And then our skylight here, I'm actually going to bring up the cube map resolution. You have to work in powers of 2, and they will tell you whenever you scroll over it, maximum resolution for the very top process cube map must be powers of 2. So I'm just going to multiply this by 4. So everything that's in your scene is kind of being reflected off each other. I don't know the science behind it, but at least that's why I haven't figured out. And then we have a bunch of flickering coming off in the hair. And so I'm going to actually come over to my visual effects tab, and I'm going to add a box reflection capture. So if I add this in here, and then let me zero out the location, and I'm just going to have it engulf my entire scene. So let me come up to my viewport here, double click on my box to kind of zoom it out a little bit. And so what this does, it's going to give us more precise reflections in our scene. So for scale here, let me just go into my viewport so I can see what I have going on. I should have wrote down my parameters here, but let's see. Let's do this live here on the screen. All right, cool. So that looks like that's good there. So I'm going to have it just for my, let's see. I was going to do it for the main street there. So zoom this up here. Then come into my right view. Let's see if I add 2 zeros. So there we go. That's good there. So now we have our reflection capture engulfing our whole scene here. Let me find an item here. Let me find my camera. So if I double click on my camera, it's going to zoom me out to where the object is. So that's another cool thing about Unreal. If you find something in your scene that you want to zoom in on, like you just double click on it and it's going to take you right there. And so now let me zoom in a little bit to the ground so we can see what happens with our reflection tab. Okay, so now I have to build my reflections. So if I come under build reflection captures, just click on that, and it's actually going to build our reflections. So it's almost like it's baking it in there. So now we should be pretty good when it comes to reflections and everything. So let me see what else we need to do. So we have atmospheric fog in here, but I'm going to add some exponential fog. And this is my favorite part of Unreal. So if I drag this in here, you can see we have some cool fog happening right away. We don't have to play with any attributes or anything to get a cool effect. So if I just wanted to rock with this, I mean, that already looks pretty cool, but let's play around with it a little bit. So I'm going to zero this out like so. And then for my scattering color, again, probably do something around purplish, somewhere around there. And I could drag this up here, somewhere like that. So we're getting like a cool foggy haze in here. See if there's any other options down here that I want to play with. Yeah, volumetric fog. Click that on. You can see is adding some volumetric fog in there. Then let's go through our sequencer. Let's just play through our scene and see what it's looking like. So if I come to my content browser, come down to animation, click on a city scene, and then I should be able to pull this up into my sequencer here, like so. And then come back up to perspective, come down to cinematic viewport, and let's click on our camera. Let's click play. You can see we're just riding through our scene, like so. And I could get smoother playback if I build my lights. You can see right here in the red, it says the lights need rebuilt. So rebuilding the lights is basically for each structure in here. Like if I click on this and you see in the lower right hand corner under mobility, we have these different options here. So if it was under static, that means that each object is going to be static in our scene and we don't have to worry about it moving at all. And so again, if we were doing like an interactive experience, we know that this lamp is always going to be here. So we can make it static. And then whenever we build our lighting, it's always going to know that that lamp is there. So these shadows are always going to be doing this. The reflection is always going to be doing this. And the light's always going to be bouncing off it, if that makes any sense. And then stationary is kind of what you want to do if you have something that might be moving, but you can still bake it out. And so that gives you the best of both worlds for static and movability, because movability is, say that you have something that's going to be moving around your scene and it's unpredictable. And again, this is going all in the interactive. So if you have something in your scene that's unpredictable, then you want to have this mobility clicked on, and that way it will know that, okay, we have to calculate the lighting and reflections and the shadows on this object here. And again, it comes down to processing power, but since everything is pre-rendered here, we don't have to really worry about that. So for the most part, everything could be static, and that will allow us to bake our lighting to be able to move our scene a lot faster. So let me come up to build. And if we come under where we see lighting quality, right now, everything looks a little bit janky because we're under preview. And so we have 4 different levels of our lighting that we could do. And so if I bring it up to medium quality, high quality, or production, usually when I'm ready to render out, I go on production because this was what calculates the slowest. But once you hit everything calculated, it's all going to render in real time and it's going to actually play through in real time. So let's actually just click on production. Then I'm going to come back over here and click build lighting and let this build out. Usually, depending on your scene size and everything and how much stuff you have going on, just take a few minutes here. Yeah, so I'm on a pretty beefy machine here. I have the Threadripper 3, and you can see it's calculating everything pretty fast down here. See my lighting's already built out. So let me click play again. All right, let me click play again. And actually, I need to change my frame rate down here. My scene was originally built in 24 FPS. So let me make sure I'm at correct frame rate. Cool. So everything's playing through pretty good. Now let me scroll through here because I want to show you guys my other favorite effect in Unreal, which is the post effects. So this is the post effects volume. It's under the visual effects tab. If I bring this over here, oops, I actually have to drag it into my scene. So I drag it into my scene. I'm going to zero it out. And if we have any Unreal user, or not Unreal, if we have any Redshift users out in the audience, this post effects processing stack kind of works a lot like Redshift, how you have your FX panel. So you can add like your bloom and your lens flares and things of that nature. So it works exactly like that. And so it's kind of like when I have my my box reflection in there, how I had to make it really large to engulf the whole scene. Same thing with your post stack. Usually you could put it in individual places that you want stuff to happen in. But if you come under here under search, and if I click on UNB and look for Unbound, if I click this, then that means that this post-processing stack is actually going to control everything that's in my scene here. So now I can X this out and I could just start rolling down this list here, seeing what I want to turn on and don't want to turn on. So I'm going to scroll up for mobile depth of field. We don't want any of that, but I do want some bloom effects. So let me click on method, intensity. Actually, I'm going to do 0.1, and then over and back under method, I want to use this convolution. Click on that, and convolution, I guess this is for better blooms. It's for like cinematic, so not really for gameplay stuff, but more cinematic. Let me click back on standard. There we go. So yeah, your intensity, for some reason, when I turn on convolution, it blanks this out, but so I have to go back to standard and then come back down to convolution, and then it, you know, it goes as so. Not sure why it does that, but that's something that I picked up on. So now we have our neon lights looking pretty cool in here. So let me click on our next stack here, which is exposure. So what exposure does is, whenever, like in real life, whenever you're in the house and you go outside and you know how your eyes have to adjust to the sunlight outside. So you might get like that glary white look for a minute until your eyes adjust. So Unreal by default, it kind of simulates that. So if you have a character inside of a house and he moves outside, it simulates that glary, you know, that stuff that happens to your eyes while it's adjusting outside. And for stuff like this, we don't really want to have that happening. And so they give you control of that inside of the processing stack. So if you come under exposure, you can actually adjust your min and your max here. And so I usually keep the numbers pretty close to each other, just so it doesn't have any variables in there. So probably want to move this down a little bit more. So maybe 0.3. There you go, somewhere around there. And this way, whenever our stuff is traveling through the scene, we don't have to worry about the lighting changing or any variables. We're kind of nailing everything down, so it's going to be consistent throughout our scene. So let me close this up. Now we have chromatic aberration. You can turn up the intensity on here. Usually this is something that I would do in post and After Effects, but since we have the option here, I think it's cool that we can control as many things as we want in Unreal, so we can do less stuff in post. So I've seen a lot of people actually do all their posts in Unreal and then just render out and not have to worry about doing any stuff in After Effects at all. So if I drag this up, you can see we're getting a cool chromatic aberration effect, but we don't want to go too crazy on it. Maybe somewhere around 1. Then if you want to have like a dirt mask on your lens there, you have that option too. You can actually make your own and bring in your own grunge matte. Then we have camera settings too. So if you want to mess with the ISO and the shutter speed, things of that nature, you have that flexibility. Let's add some lens flares to it. Let me let's see what happens. I click on 5. So now we're adding some lens flares to here. Turn on bokeh size. Somewhere around there. Maybe let's bump this up like 15. Something around that. Looks pretty cool. Okay, so now we have our depth of field options here as well. So we want to go high. Let me go extreme. All right, there we go. So I had to come down to my depth blur radius to really get this kicked off, but you can see we have some cool depth of field going on here. Something like that looks pretty neat. So if I actually go back, start playing through this, there you go. So cool. And then we have some color grading stuff down here as well. You have saturation, contrast, all that fun stuff. I'm not going to mess with any of that stuff at all. And actually, let me come up and I'm going to knock down my depth of field a little bit so we're not too crazy with it. Then come down to here. We have these rendering options as well. So we can add ambient occlusion, which we can actually export our own ambient occlusion EXR file for if we wanted to do stuff in After Effects with it, or whatever your post-processing program is that you want to do. I'm going to leave this stuff alone here. Again, we have ray tracing options as well. So if you want to have ray tracing ambient occlusion, you have that option. You could turn on global illumination here. See what else we have. Motion blur is pretty cool. So if I turn on motion blur and actually, so now you can see we actually have built-in motion blur inside of our sequence, which is real cool. So you don't have to worry about doing any of this stuff in post anymore. Let me crank it up a little bit, say like 1. So now, yeah, you can see we have some really cool motion blur playing through our scene. Makes it look like we're really speeding through our city here. Actually, I'm going to turn this off. And then what else? I know we had some reflections. Yeah, so we have reflection types down here too. We have screen space. We have ray tracing. So if you want better, if you have a graphics card that has ray tracing, you could turn that on as well. And then I think that's it for our post-processing stack. So now let me get into my, under lighting, cast shadows. Definitely want that turned on. And so now let me get into the rendering of the sequencer. So if I pull this up, so say that we have our scene done. This is exactly how we want it. You come down into your sequencer, and this is where you're going to render everything out. And so so I'm not going to worry about the spaceship. More importantly, I'm just going to show you guys how to render this part out. So if I come under, where are we at? Let me scroll all the way up. If I come under track here, under green, I'm going to add the sequencer. No, I want to come down to camera cut track. So basically, if I hit camera cut track, this is going to add this file up here. And this is where we can actually start adding our cameras into it. And so what's cool about Unreal is you can actually have your animation play out, but then you can also set up several different cameras inside of your scene. And this, the sequencer acts as like an NLE. And so if we want to have camera 1 play for 10 frames, the camera 2 play for 20 frames, you can actually set that up into separate camera tracks here in Unreal. So if I come to the front of my sequencer, then click on camera cuts, come under camera, click on here where the plus sign is, come up to new binding and click camera. Then we can see that we added an actual camera track to our sequencer here. Which is really cool. All right, so now if I want to render this out, you just click on the clipboard here or your slate, this little slate button here where it says render options. So now we have this option for render movie settings. So if I come under capture settings here, image output format, we have all these different formats in here. Like I said, now we can render out in Apple ProRes. I usually render out as an EXR sequence. And then, if you want to have like different outputs, like if you wanted to have ambient occlusion, we have that option under where we at custom render passes. So if I click on custom render passes and then come down here where it says include render passes, these are all the different render passes that we have available to us. So we have ambient occlusion. You could do depth of field. You could do opacity channels. you have a whole bunch of different stuff in here that you can actually render out separately. So if you wanted to do any compositing stuff in like Unreal, or not Unreal, in After Effects or Nuke, whatever you're using, you have that flexibility as well. But I'm just going to do an Apple ProRes for this demonstration. Resolution, I'm just going to do 1920 by 1080. Now I could do 422 HQ. Then let me see what other settings I need to set. So under here, this is just where I'm going to be rendering my stuff out. So I'm actually going to make a folder called render. Double click on this, hit select folder. And then I believe there's one other option that I was missing here. One really important one. Here we go. So under general, you want to come down to use separate process. So you want to click on that, and this is going to give you everything at full resolution whenever you render out. And then let me see under animation here. So this is interesting down here. So you have the option to have a couple of warm-up frames. So think about, so say you have like some particles or some type of effects in here that you need to have warmed up before you want to start rendering. So say you want to have your sequence start maybe after like 100 frames, you can actually type that in here. So say, okay, after 20 frames, then I want it to start rendering. That means that you're going to let your sequence, warm up for those 25 frames, and then it's going to be able to export from there. And you can also do it by seconds here as well. So you can have it delay before warm up. If you want to add a delay to it, delay before shot warm up, you have all types of flexibility down here, which is really cool. So I think we're ready to hit render. I think you guys are going to be amazed at how fast this renders out. So I'm going to click capture movie, hit save selected. And it's just going to save out our scene and everything before it starts rendering out. But once it starts rendering, it's actually going to come up with a viewport that you can kind of see exactly what's going on. All right, so now you see it has our city name come up here. And now this is the viewport. It's going to give it a 25 frame warm up like we had set up. And then it's going to move it to our camera. Now everything is rendering in real time for the most part. It's just going to play through the sequence here. You can see everything happening as it's playing. And then down here in the lower right hand corner, you can see it says capturing video. So once it's done, all right, so now we should be able to open our capture folder. And then let me open this up in QuickTime and click play. And there we go. We have our rendered sequence all ready to go right out of Unreal. So that literally took me, a few seconds to render out. I mean, it's pretty crazy how fast this could render out. And then, like I said, I'd use EXE files or EXR files to bring into After Effects to add stuff like deep glow and red giant looks just to kind of spice it up a little bit more, which I can show you guys just real quick. But first, I kind of wanted to show you guys how you could bring X particles into Unreal as well. So I'm going to bring up the scene to open the sequence, and then I'm going to show you guys how to export from Cinema 4D. And let me get this started up right now. All right, so let me close out of this scene and Cinema, close projects. Let me find my X particle scene here. Let me go, where is it at? Water sphere liquid. So I actually did a tutorial on my YouTube channel on how to do this. So I'm not going to break it down completely. If you want to see exactly how I did it, just go to my YouTube channel, YouTube/Jonathan Winbush. But if I click play here, you can see I have this sphere with a whole bunch of liquid kind of playing around in it. And so basically it's real simple. I just have a fluid effects. I have a wave formatter in here, and I have the cache, or I have the mesh cached out here. So real simple setup. So if I want to export this out for Unreal, it's not going to be able to take the particles from Cinema into Unreal. And so I figured out a hack here. Basically, if I come up to file and export as an Alembic file, I can bring that Alembic file into Unreal Engine. So if I come over to my Alembic settings under my export settings, you want to come to file format. You want to use the top one here, not the legacy. And then this is a real important part here where it says start frame. Usually it will start at 0, but you want to make sure you're starting at frame 1. For some reason, when we bring it into Unreal and we have it at start frame 0, it's not going to import correctly. So you definitely want to make sure that you have it on frame 1. And then I also want to make sure that you have your ODV or OVDB mesher You want to have this selected whenever you go to export this out. So let's click OK. Export selections here and everything else looks fine. Click OK. And then I'm just going to export it to my UE4 folder. And put ABC at the end of this one. All right, so now let me open up Unreal again. And instead of starting from scratch, I can actually show you guys right here. So I'm just going to open up my original file that I worked on whenever I was doing this. Okay, so I have my file opened up here. So if I come over to my animation folder, open up my sequencer, you can see exactly what we have going on. So what I'm going to do is, let's see, let me, all right, cool. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to delete my Alembic file here so we don't see it. All right, so I'm going to show you guys how to import this from scratch. So if I come over to, let's see, my content folder, I want to click on, actually I could delete this too, just so we're starting from scratch. Actually, let me just make a new folder. So I made a folder called Alembic. I'm going to import it into here. And then I'm going to look for my file that I made. So let me project files, UE4. There we go, NAB, ABC. So ABC stands for Alembic. Click open. So this is our Alembic importer here. So under import type, we want to come under geometry cache, which is experimental, but it works perfectly fine. From our frame rate start, I'm going to click 1, and I believe everything else should be fine. Actually, I think for this, I did Autodesk. So yeah, I did Autodesk here for my preset, my 3D Max. And then let me click import and everything should play back exactly as we need. All right, cool. So I have my liquid sphere here. I just drag it into my scene. Let me zero everything out from my location. Cool. Let me actually play through here because I think I might have to move it up. Yeah, so let me move it up to the center here. There we go. So now when we click play on it, you notice that it's not moving at all in here. And that's because we have to actually add our Alembic file into our sequencer. So if I click on track, let me see over here, add the sequencer. So after the sequencer, let me click on this Alembic file. Okay, so once I have this in here, I'm gonna click on my track button and then come up to geometry cache, click that. And actually, I should have did this at the beginning of my sequencer. So let me move this all the way over. Now, if I click play, you can see we actually have our Alembic file playing in our scene. So that's a quick and easy way that we could bring our fluids into Unreal as well. And then I actually did have like a neon material on here. So if I come to my content browser, let me go under, look for my material that I had put on there. Let me scroll all the way down. I think it was this neon purple one. Click and drag that there. There we go. So if I click play, you can see that's exactly how I did this scene here. If I come over to my camera, and there we go. That's exactly how I added X particles into Unreal. So hopefully this helped you guys out get started inside of using Cinema 4D to Unreal. I'm going to answer some questions for you guys if you have anything. Hopefully this is a good starting point to get you guys moving forward. But thank you guys for watching my presentation, and I hope you guys learned a lot. And make sure you go to my YouTube channel as well, youtube.com/Jonathan Winbush. I actually have a lot of tutorials on there on how I work from Cinema 4D into Unreal. So if you want to see some more in-depth stuff, go there as well.